I was a junior archivist at the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University. And I have a confession. I saw something strange, something that now has me questioning the very nature of reality and the possibility that maybe there is some magic in this world, some mystery hiding in the darkness, waiting to be uncovered. Now, going back a fortnight ago, the library was putting on an exhibit featuring out-of-place artifacts. Think Voyage manuscript to Starving of Saqqara. My colleague, Mina, and I were each assigned a display and given responsibility over several strange pieces. I was given 7 different objects and manuscripts, but there was one item that struck me more than the rest. A small soapstone carving of some sort of beast that had been donated to our collection from an anonymous source. It looked a little like a mix between a dog and a lizard. It was carved with tremendous detail and had tiny bejeweled eyes that glinted red and blue. There was something about it. It looked alive, and I spent a good amount of time staring at it, slightly twisting it back and forth in my fingers, watching its eyes glint and gleam. It was strange, and I swear that sometimes it moved ever so slightly. One day its tail would be fully curled, and the next it would be slightly less curled. Nothing too crazy, I know, but still, I was fascinated by it, and wanted to do it justice, which is why I saved it for the last, waiting to place it on its tiny velvet dais, until I had noted every minute detail of it. Until finally, 2 weeks ago, I walked into the library around dusk, ready to complete my display and be done with the strange statue and its mystery once and for all. "So," Mina said as I walked into our shared office, "did you see him?" "What?" "Oh, come on, he's been here for days. He really looks like someone I saw online once. Wait a sec." Mina pulled out her phone and flicked around it until she exclaimed, "Ha! Yeah, he totally looks like him." I glanced at her screen, keeping my face straight. "Really? I mean, kinda. His hair is darker, he looks goofier." "So you did see him," she said triumphantly. "I wonder what he's doing. He has some kind of special clearance. I've seen him back here, snooping around. He smiled at me 2 days ago, and I ran off. I still can't meet his gaze." She leaned towards me and whispered, "I think he's a special agent." "Wow," I said. "Have you finished your display?" I chuckled to myself as she glowered at me and hunched back over her desk. I walked over to mine and shuffled my papers around until I found what I was looking for. A small, time-polished wooden box. I grabbed it, told Mina I'd be back, and left to the archivist viewing room. He, of course, was in there, wearing the same black suit he always wore, sitting near the back corner, looking at some relic carved from a stone that was the color of night, a binder open next to him. He wrote something in the binder before glancing up briefly at me, smiling. I returned it, tight-lipped, and sat near the entrance with my back facing him. I felt my anxiety spike and swear I could almost feel the heat of his gaze boring into my back. After a few tense moments, I heard a voice behind me. "Sorry to interrupt. I'm a big, enthusiast. Mind if I take a look?" I turned slightly, not meeting his gaze, and nodded. "What is it?" I told him that no one knew. "I see," he said. "Where did they find it?" "They found it, strangely enough, in a pretty large plot of land. I think it was around 200 square feet in the central region of the Eastern Mediterranean, around Israel." The man looked at me confused. "Do you mean miles? 200 square feet isn't very large." Oh, yeah, I did. Just misspoke. Sorry, I said, trying to hide my embarrassment. God, it's been a long week. It happens, he said, smiling widely at me and leaning closer, peering down at the carving. I laughed, thanked him, grabbed the box, and ran out of the room, back to the safety of my office. Mina turned to me, her face expectant, and said in a sing-song voice, "Secret agent, man." "Shit," I said, suddenly and loudly, realizing that in my haste to leave, I had left the soapstone dog lizard on the table and grabbed only the box. "Be right back." I jogged back to the room, silently berating myself for being so stupid. That tiny carving was priceless, an enigma. My heart rose up to my throat as I neared the entrance, and I gritted my teeth, preparing for an awkward interaction. But the room was totally empty, and I let out a long sigh of relief. I made my way to the table, ready to see the solid shape of the statuette, but the table was empty. Panicked, I crouched down, scouring the surrounding floor, and, for the first few moments, saw nothing. And then there it was, its minuscule face peering at me from behind the leg of the chair across the room. It looked almost like it was hiding. I scrambled over and picked it up, gasping as I did. The once smoothly carved scales were now pricked outward, like the thing had fluffed itself up in fear or anger. My hand now stinging from the shallow cuts of the scales. I stood to leave. As I turned the corner, I ran into something solid and yelped. It was the man. He quickly apologized and moved out of the way. "You're bleeding," I said, noticing the handkerchief he had pressed around his right hand. Blood was blossoming slowly across its surface in the shape of a semicircle, like a bite mark. "What, this?" he smirked. "I've had worse." I muttered some nonsense and excused myself, clutching the soapstone figurine close to my chest, trying to ease my throbbing heart. That night, Mina and I stayed late setting up. They closed Beinecke early, and at around 1:30 a.m., we knew we were the only ones in the building. We had been sitting silently in our office, totally engrossed in our work, when Mina announced loudly that she needed some coffee and some food, making me jump. She apologized and asked me if I wanted anything. She left soon after, and even way up in my office, I could hear the final sounding echo of the employee entrance door closing behind her. Now, Beinecke is strange enough in the daylight during the normal hustle and bustle of its open hours. So its strangeness only grows by great magnitudes in the night, in the silence, in the dark. I had never been in it when it was completely empty before, and honestly, I was unnerved. I hummed a small tune, trying to rid myself of the sense of dread that seemed to crawl in with the knowledge that I was truly alone. And in an effort to distract myself even more from the crushing silence rising up around me, I pulled open my drawer, telling myself that it was finally time to put the little soapstone statuette in its place of honor. Finally time to let the world gaze upon it in wonder and speculate its origin. Or perhaps make up their own origin story for it. I opened the drawer and saw the familiar wooden box. I picked it up and flipped it open, ready to gaze upon those blue-red eyes. But it wasn't there. The box, it was empty. "Not again," I screeched, standing up and tossing paper from my desk in a wild search for it. And then, over the heavy breath of my rising panic, I heard a strange grunting noise and a loud clang. I stopped, feeling the hairs slowly stand to attention on my arms and across the nape of my neck. There was another heavier crashing noise and a mad scrabbling sound like enormous nails on stone or a dog on linoleum. I walked towards the office door and poked my head out. "Mina?" I called. hoping she hadn't forgotten our heated talk about scaring the ever-living shit out of coworkers. "Mina, that you?" There was a muffled-sounding yell and an eerie, warbling, whining noise. Frightened, but curious, I stepped out of the office and towards the noise. I wanted to prove to myself that what I was hearing was nothing to fear. Maybe it was just the central heating unit starting up again, rattling around, peering louder in the nighttime lull. I walked down the staircase and around the center stack, hoping to see nothing. What I saw instead froze my blood and paralyzed me with fear. Now a floor above the atrium, I saw a smooth-scaled beast crouched low over something. It looked like it had its front leg on it and was pressing down, hard. I squinted, trying to see in the dim, ambient light, then gasped. It, whatever it was, had a person. My gasp must have echoed around the walls and toward the thing because it stopped. Its ears pricked and slowly turned towards me. Its eyes flashed blue, then red as it saw me, and I staggered back, my foot hitting something metallic and heavy. I glanced down and saw a gun. I heard a soft growl and looked back up. The beast had risen from the person it had been attacking and was moving towards me. Its enormous mass now out of the way, I could see that the person was a man wearing a black suit and a gas mask. He was lying very still. The beast prowled closer, and without thinking, I reached down and picked up the gun. Its eyes narrowed sinisterly at me. Long ribbons of green drool streamed from its mouth and hung thick on the tips of 2-foot-long fangs. It growled again, crouching low like it was gearing up to pounce. I held the gun, inhaled deeply, and pulled the trigger. The bullets ripped into the thick flesh of the beast's shoulder and side. It screamed, lunging at me with a sudden swiftness that caught me entirely off guard. I was flung high into the air and landed with a painful crack against the glass paneling. I shook my head, dazed, but realizing I could hear the slow, clicking noise of the beast's nails echoing from the floor as it approached me again. "Hey!" My eyes shot open and I saw the beast stop its steady walk over to me and shift around to look at the man in the gas mask, who was now standing. A giant red splotch stained his shirt from where the thing had been crushing him. "Fuck you!" he said, striding forth confidently, holding another pistol up and out. He fired 2 shots off in quick succession, a double tap, hitting the beast squarely in the chest and the side of the face. The bullets emitted a blinding, otherworldly light and echoed loudly around the walls. I watched in horror as part of the beast's face shattered off, leaving a large gaping hole. The beast staggered back and shrieked, spouting off a sickly-looking greenish goo that I assumed was its blood. It crouched, as if ready to spring at the man, but instead jumped out of the plate glass window 20 feet away. The man ran over and looked down at me. I was sitting, open-mouthed, against the base of one of the stacks, still holding the gun I'd picked up. "You okay?" "Yeah," I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think so." "Hey, the man began, but was cut off by another, louder voice. "What the fuck, Elizabeth?" The sound of the door slamming and footsteps running up the stairs echoed towards us. Mina breached the landing, and I watched the anger on her face turn to shock and fear as she looked at the mess before her. "What?" she started, slipping on some of the green goo that had spilled from the creature. She looked down at her shoe, then at me sitting against the ruined stack with a gun in my hand, then at the man in the gas mask, then at the shattered window. The man said, flapping his arms in an embarrassed sort of way at me. "Thanks?" He looked around at the disaster surrounding him, his gas mask totally obscuring his expression, before he turned, ran, and hopped out of the broken window in one smooth motion. The next day when I awoke, for one glorious moment, I remembered nothing about the night before, until it all came rushing back to me. I jumped out of bed and was out the door in less than 10 minutes. I was on edge the entire drive to Beinecke, expecting to see sirens and tape and men with 3 words plastered in yellow on their backs. Instead, there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. Beinecke looked as good as new. There was no shattered window, no wreck and ruin inside, no green goo smeared around. It was perfect. Mina was nowhere to be seen, and I assumed she had taken the day off. I should have too, in all honesty. But I was more curious than afraid. Out of habit, I went to check on the soapstone figurine, then remembered I had lost it the night before. Regardless, I opened my drawer, and nestled inside, wrapped in a clean white handkerchief, was the soapstone statuette. I thought I'd never see it again. It was in bad shape, and its head had a chunk of stone missing from it. A chill ran down my spine. I wrapped it up again, deciding that it was best if it was locked away in the vaults and forgotten about. So, I took it deep down beneath Beinecke, to a place very few individuals are allowed access to, and left it there, with peace of mind, or so I thought. The other day, on a whim or compulsion, more like, I went back to the vaults, wanting to rid myself of my reoccurring nighttime panics, thoughts that maybe the statue escaped again, somehow. I inserted the key and opened the box, ready for my mind to be eased. In its place was a single matte black business card and a very nondescript cell phone. 2 things were on the card: double 3s bookending an open triangle, and, scrawled neatly in vibrant white ink, the words, "Call me